Yo, what's going on, Headliner Nation? It's your boy, The Doc, and we are back for the Week 16 injury update show. Only a few more injury update shows to do for the rest of the year, and hopefully you guys are still competing for fantasy championships, and this video will help you make some decisions regarding all of the players that are injured heading into this week. But there's a lot of guys to talk about, so let's jump into it. All right, guys, as always, we're going to skip Thursday Night Football. Chargers picking up a big win. A lot of playoff implications for the Chargers and Broncos, but no real guys to talk about from that game. So we're heading straight into guys that were placed on the IR this week, and there were quite a few big names placed on IR this week. I'm going to throw them up on the screen. Obviously, the biggest one, probably Nick Chubb with a foot fracture. Just a really bad year for him coming off that ACL tear. Hopefully next year he will be healthy heading into the season. Foot fractures typically take about 3 to 4 months to heal from, so we should see Nick Chubb well into the summer. Unlike this season with the ACL, hopefully we can see Nick Chubb get back to his former glory and get totally healthy this offseason. Then Evan Ingram had a shoulder injury. That ended up being a labrum tear. He had surgery on that labrum tear, so he's done for the year as well. Now, we have quite a few players get ruled out already this week, so I'm going to throw them up on the screen as well. George Pickens already ruled out with the hamstring injury. Deontay Johnson, just a really weird situation with the Ravens. Not really sure what's going on there. I'm surprised they haven't cut him, but I think they're kind of punishing him for not showing up at practice. I don't really understand it. Justin Fields has an abdominal injury, so he's already been ruled out. Isaac Guerrero has also been ruled out with a hamstring injury. Alvin Kamara has a groin strain. This one's a little bit more serious than the other ones. There's a chance that he will be done for the season with this groin injury, but highly unlikely that he plays this week. And then David Montgomery has an MCL sprain / tear. There were some reports that it was a complete tear. There were a lot of reports that he would need surgery on this and that he would be done for the entire season. Now things are saying that there's a chance that he could play in the playoffs. That doesn't really help us for fantasy, but if you're a Lions fan, just know that there is a chance with the MCL that it could heal on its own and he wouldn't need surgery, and he could potentially play with a brace or something in the playoffs if they go far enough in the playoffs. So we're not totally ruling him out for the season, but just know David Montgomery probably not going to play for your fantasy teams again this year. So you can drop him off of those fantasy squads. I would not expect him back this regular season. Reminder, we do have 2 games on Saturday, Ravens, Steelers, and Texans, Chiefs. We're going to start actually with the Chiefs here and quarterback Patrick Mahomes. He has a high ankle sprain, and I don't really know how Pat Mahomes gets folded into a pretzel twice a year and never misses practice. I really don't understand if he's just a superhuman or he looks like he's getting more hurt than he actually is, or if the Chiefs just have an incredible training staff, or he's been through this enough times. I don't really understand Patrick Mahomes and his ability to quickly recover from injuries that normally keep guys out for multiple weeks. But just know that Pat Mahomes didn't really even miss practice this week. It sounds like he will play in this game. And you have to assume that while he will be a little limited mobility-wise, he's still Pat Mahomes. If you're starting him and you've been starting him, you can probably still throw him in your lineups. Don't expect a huge fall off in terms of his rushing production, because he only really runs when he absolutely has to. He might actually throw a little bit more, which could potentially be better for your fantasy team anyway. He's not like the most explosive runner in the world. So him throwing the ball downfield and pushing the ball downfield, probably better for your fantasy teams anyway. Let's shift gears to the wide receivers. And first up, we got Chris Olave coming back from his concussion. About a month ago, he was carted off after taking a huge hit on a throw over the middle of the field. It's a second concussion this year, but he was activated off the IR into his 21-day practice window, so there's at least a chance that he could play. I don't really understand why they're pushing him back so quick on this, but it's a good sign that he is back practicing, even in a limited capacity. It's not a guarantee that he will play. You're probably not itching to throw him into your fantasy lineups, but just know Chris Olave on the way back for potentially a late season return if the team opts to go that direction. Now, wide receiver Xavier Legette, dealing with a hip injury, has not practiced yet this week, and the injury was described as week to week. So I doubt that we actually see Xavier Legette able to play this week. Small bump to Adam Thielen, but no other real huge fantasy implications for the Panthers. Now, wide receiver T. Higgins, on the other hand, got rest/knee in terms of his injury designation, and that doesn't really tell us a lot. He did pick up a quad injury back in week 8. There's been mixed reporting on if this knee issue is a re-aggravation of that quad injury. Zach Taylor mentioned the quad specifically in an interview, so it is possible that he has re-injured his quad or that it's a re-aggravation of that quad injury from before. Again, there is a chance that T. Higgins is not able to play in this game. You need to have a backup in place. Keep an eye out for Zach Taylor's comments on Friday's press conference. He could give us a little bit more insight into what is actually going on with T. Higgins. But we know from a contract standpoint, he doesn't have a lot to play for right this second. So I would not be surprised if he was a sit this week if he's managed to tweak his quad, or at least he thinks he's tweaked his quad. I won't question if a guy is actually hurt or not, but it seems a little suspicious that T. Higgins could potentially miss this game. They are not actually ruled out of the playoffs yet. They have a road to making the playoffs still, and they need T. Higgins to be able to play in this game in order to make that a more realistic reality for the team. So if he can play, I think there's a good chance he will play. If this is nothing, then it's nothing. So again, the team's not really being very clear with this T. Higgins situation for this week. Last wide receiver of the week is Jaylen Waddle. He has a knee injury. No official diagnosis was given for his knee injury. Coach Mike McDaniel called it a day-to-day injury that wasn't serious and wouldn't require surgery. So that's a good sign, at least, that it's not a major issue. But based on the video that I saw, he kind of got rolled up in a pileup, took a bit of a shot to the outside of his knee. And typically when you see an impact to the outside of the knee, the inside ligament is the one that is affected. So his MCL is probably the thing that is giving him trouble right now. My guess is it's a real mild MCL sprain. There's a chance he could play, but not practicing, not a good sign. It's somebody that you probably want to take out of your lineups and have a plan in place for him not to play. And then if you have to make a decision if he ends up suiting up. Mild MCL sprain, you're looking at about 2 to 3 weeks in terms of recovery timeline for that. So I would be very surprised to see Jaylen Waddle this week. Jonnu Smith, probably the guy that is the most likely to benefit from this injury. He should probably be in your starting tight end spot unless you have a really great option at tight end. And if you're in a dynasty league, Malik Washington could be a guy you could pick up on the cheap right now for free. If he pops off in that Jaylen Waddle role, he could be a guy that a lot of guys are trying to stash on their dynasty squad. So just keep an eye out for Malik Washington. He had played well after Waddle went out last week. Could be a name heading into the offseason. Let's talk about the running backs next. And we've got Alvin Kamara with a groin strain. The team is technically still evaluating Kamara, but the reports are that this could be something that they will have to shut him down for the rest of the season. I'd be surprised if we see him play again, given his age and the fact that there's just not a lot of season left to be played. Kendre Miller would step into that RB1 role for the Saints, and is a guy that if you haven't picked up already is probably not hanging out on waivers. He was a pretty popular pickup in most leagues from what I can tell. Now, the running back situation for the Seahawks has gotten more complicated than it was even last week. Zach Charbonnet dealing with an oblique strain. Kenneth Walker has that calf strain injury. And the Seahawks running backs just have an issue where neither one of them can be healthy at the same time. Walker is back practicing in full, though, so I would say that he's probably the most likely to start and play in this game. Zach Charbonnet, with that oblique strain, I think he'll be able to play through it, but I don't think that he's going to be start-worthy if Kenneth Walker is back to full health. If Kenneth Walker is playing, he's the guy that I'm throwing into lineups, but obviously his ceiling will depend a lot on if Zach Charbonnet is in the game as well. Neither one of these guys looking like great options if they're both healthy, but of the two, it sounds like Kenneth Walker is the healthier of the bunch. 2 more running backs we need to talk about. First up's Tony Pollard. He has an ankle injury. He's been dealing with this ankle injury for the last month or so. He appeared to re-aggravate it in Sunday's game. He's not super far off from hitting 1,000 yards rushing, so I think he will play again at some point before the end of the season, but he's highly questionable to play in this game. Tyjae Spears could be a bell cow for this week. somebody that's probably on a lot of benches. If you want to throw him in to your lineup this week as a solid flex, if we find out that Tony Pollard is not going to play officially before Sunday. Now, as for Joe Mixon, he has an ankle injury, was limited all week as well, but it doesn't seem like this is actually a real injury. He was not listed with an injury. He was not designated with an injury. It's very possible that this is nothing, but I'm mentioning it because the Texans have clinched a playoff spot. And if there is something here and he's not at 100%, we could see his workload get decreased. So again, I'm not throwing him out of my lineups just because of this, but it could be a situation where we look back on Monday and go, why did Joe Mixon barely play? And I want you guys to know that I'm trying to give you a heads up if you're making a tough lineup decision that this could be something that turns out very poorly if the team decides to hold him back from playing this week. Not saying they will. I'm just saying you need to be aware of that when you're making lineup decisions in the fantasy playoffs. We're going to finish up with two tight ends. First up, we got David Njoku for the Browns. He has a hamstring strain, missed last week. Doesn't look like he's on pace to play this week, so make sure you have a backup ready for David Njoku. And the Browns are kind of an interesting case right now because they are currently tied with 4 other teams with only 3 wins. So there is a chance that they could end up with a top 3 pick in the NFL draft if things break their way and some other teams pick up some wins. And that would be an interesting landing spot for a lot of different players in next year's draft. But David Njoku doesn't look like he's going to be able to play, and I don't see much of an incentive to bring him back for the rest of this season. And then we've got tight end Brenton Strange for the Jaguars. He has an AC sprain. It's very mild. The team's not too worried about it. Had his best game of his career, 11 catches, 73 yards last week. He is streamable for you and could be available on waivers still. He should be rostered on most dynasty teams. He's got a lot of potential, and he's a guy that you can pick up on the cheap that has shown some potential at tight end. He's super young, super athletic. Just a guy I really like stashing on my dynasty squads because the tight end position is so bad, and he backs up a player in Evan Ingram that has started to have quite the history in terms of injuries. Brenton Strange could be a gem for your dynasty teams. Definitely needs to be rostered in those leagues specifically. That's it for this week's injury show. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. If you did, like the video, subscribe to the channel. Helps us out a ton. I know a lot of people are not watching these injury videos as the season gets to the end here, but I appreciate everybody who's still checking in. Hopefully you guys are still competing for fantasy championships. I want to hear about that success down below once you win, but if you haven't already, hit the join button, become a member of Headliner Nation's exclusive Discord. We're talking football 365 over there on the Discord. A lot of great people. We don't let any jerks in the Discord. So if you haven't already, make sure you hit the join button and become a member of Headliner Nation today. I want to thank our sponsors over at Underdog. Use the code Headliners when you sign up. Get up to $1,000 of bonus cash on your first deposit. Great place to play and a great time to play over at Underdog if your fantasy season is over. It's also great for the playoffs to still be in on the action. If you want to scratch that fantasy itch, do it over on Underdog. But that's all I got for you guys this week. Hopefully you enjoyed it, and leave me some comments down below. What do you think I should do in terms of video content heading into the playoffs? Because typically I don't do injury videos after the season is over, after the fantasy season is over. And I want to know what type of content you guys want us to be pushing out on the channel. So leave me a comment down below on some projects or special videos or special content that you guys would like during the playoffs. Do you want me to jump straight into the rookies? Do you want me to wait a little bit and talk about the playoffs specifically? Let me know in the comments down below. But that's all I got for you guys. Hopefully you enjoyed it, and we'll see you next time.
Analytics off the chain.